Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Podcasts with Ali and Aiza, where we help you improve your English through real, natural conversations. I'm Ali, and I'm super excited to be here with you today because we're going to talk about something I know many of you love, going to the cinema and watching movies.
And I'm Aiza. Hey everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. You know, Ali and I actually went to see a film last weekend, and let me tell you, it was quite an experience. Not exactly in the way we expected, though. So we thought, why not share this story with all of you? It's a perfect opportunity to practice some everyday English expressions that you can use when talking about movies, entertainment, and even when things don't quite go as planned.
Exactly. And before we dive into our movie adventure, let me just remind our wonderful listeners what we're all about here. Our goal is simple. We want to help you speak English more naturally and confidently. We're not going to throw a bunch of grammar rules at you or make you memorize boring lists. Instead, we're going to have a real conversation, just like two friends chatting over coffee, and along the way, we'll highlight useful vocabulary, common expressions, and phrases that native speakers actually use in everyday life.
That's right. And here's the thing, learning English doesn't have to feel like studying. It should feel like hanging out with friends, picking up new ways to express yourself, and getting more comfortable with the language bit by bit. So throughout this episode, whenever we use an interesting phrase or expression, we'll naturally explain what it means and how you can use it in your own conversations. Sound good?
Perfect. So, shall we talk about this movie experience? I have to say, Aiza, when you suggested we go see that new horror film last Saturday, I was actually pretty pumped about it. I mean, the previews looked absolutely terrifying, right? The way they showed that creepy house, the eerie music, the shadows moving in the darkness, I genuinely thought we were in for a serious scare.
Oh, I know. I was thinking the exact same thing. The promotional material was so well done, and all the reviews I'd seen online were talking about how it was supposed to be the scariest movie of the year. People were saying things like, "You won't sleep for days," and "prepare to be absolutely petrified." So naturally, I was expecting to be jumping out of my seat, maybe even covering my eyes during the really intense parts. But you know what? When we actually sat down and watched the whole thing from beginning to end, it turned out to be something completely different than what we anticipated.
Completely different is right. Okay, so let me paint the picture for everyone listening. We got to the theater about 15 minutes early because Aiza is one of those people who absolutely has to get there with plenty of time to spare. No rushing for her. And honestly, I appreciate that because it meant we could get really good seats right in the middle of the theater, not too close to the screen but not too far back either. Plus, it gave us time to hit up the concession stand and load up on all the classic cinema snacks.
Hey, being early is a virtue. But yes, the concession stand. Oh my goodness. Can we talk about how expensive movie theater food is these days? I mean, I love popcorn as much as the next person, but paying what feels like a small fortune for a bucket of popcorn kernels and some carbonated beverages is just wild. Although I have to admit, there's something special about movie theater popcorn. It just hits differently than the microwave stuff you make at home, you know?
100%. There's that perfect combination of butter and salt, and it's always served piping hot. I actually got the large bucket, and I'm not ashamed to say it, because I knew I'd want something to munch on during those supposedly terrifying scenes. I figured it would give my hands something to do instead of gripping the armrests in fear. Little did I know I'd end up eating out of nervousness, boredom, or just pure habit instead of terror.
And I went for the soda, a massive one with extra ice because the theater was actually pretty warm. But here's the funny part that I want to point out to our listeners. I made a classic mistake. I was so thirsty when we first sat down, and I was sipping away during all the previews and commercials, you know, those advertisements they show before the actual movie starts. By the time the opening credits began rolling, I had already polished off about 3/4 of my drink. When I say polished off, I mean I had consumed almost all of it, finished it completely. It's a really casual way to say you've eaten or drunk everything. So there I was, sitting through a supposedly scary movie with an empty cup and a lot of ice cubes rattling around.
I noticed that. You kept shaking the cup trying to get those last little drops of soda, and the ice was making all this noise. But honestly, it didn't matter much because the theater wasn't exactly silent with suspense like we'd expected. In fact, There were quite a few moments where people in the audience were actually laughing out loud. And not that nervous, uncomfortable laughter you sometimes hear during horror films when people are trying to release tension. No, this was genuine amusement because some scenes were unintentionally hilarious.
Exactly. And this brings me to a really useful English expression that I want to share with everyone listening today. During the movie, when we walked out afterward and started discussing our thoughts, I used this phrase, if anything. This is such a common expression in English, and it's incredibly handy when you want to say that something is actually the opposite of what was expected, or when you want to add a contrasting point to what someone just said. For example, if someone asks, "Was the movie scary?" you might respond, "Well, not really. If anything, it was more amusing than frightening." See how that works?
That's a great explanation. So basically, if anything introduces a statement that goes against what might be assumed or what was previously mentioned. Let me give you another example to make it even clearer. Imagine your friend says, "I thought that restaurant would be too expensive," and you reply, "Actually, if anything, the prices were surprisingly reasonable." You're contradicting the expectation, right? Or here's another one. "He didn't study less for the exam. If anything, he studied even more than usual." It's a really sophisticated way to express contrast in English.
Perfect examples. And in the case of our movie, I would definitely say, if anything, it leaned way more toward comedy than horror. There was this one particular scene. Oh my goodness, Ollie, do you remember the part where the monster was supposed to make its big dramatic entrance? The music swelled up all ominous and intense. The main character was backing into a corner, breathing heavily, and then this creature comes bursting through the door, and
it looked absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry to anyone who worked hard on the special effects, but that monster costume or CGI or whatever it was supposed to be, it just didn't land. The proportions were all wrong, the movements were jerky and unnatural, and honestly, it reminded me more of a character from a children's cartoon than a terrifying beast from a horror film. The entire audience erupted in laughter at that moment, and I heard someone a few rows behind us say, "Are you kidding me right now?"
I couldn't help myself, I laughed too. And the thing is, once you start laughing at a horror movie, it's really hard to take it seriously again. The spell is broken, so to speak. Every time something was supposed to be scary after that, people were almost waiting for it to be funny instead. The filmmakers had completely lost the audience's trust in their ability to deliver genuine scares. It's actually a shame because I think the actors were trying their best, and the story itself wasn't terrible, it was just the execution that fell flat.
Fell flat is another great expression for our listeners. When something falls flat, it means it fails to have the intended effect or impact. You can use this in so many contexts. A joke that nobody laughs at? It fell flat. A sales presentation that doesn't convince anyone? It fell flat. A surprise party where the person being surprised already knew about it? Definitely fell flat. In our case, the horror elements of the movie fell flat because instead of scaring us, they made us giggle.
Now, I want to mention something interesting that I noticed during our movie experience. Even though the film itself was disappointing in terms of its actual content and quality, there was something I really enjoyed. And it made me think about how sometimes the experience around an activity can be more valuable or memorable than the activity itself. For me, honestly, the absolute highlight of the evening, the best part, the thing I enjoyed most, was actually just sitting there with a big tub of warm, buttery popcorn munching away in the dark theater.
See, this is what I love about going to the movies, even when the movie isn't great. There's something nostalgic and comforting about the whole ritual of it. The smell of the popcorn when you walk in, finding your seat, the lights dimming down, the sound of people getting settled around you. It's an experience that goes beyond just watching a film. You could probably watch that same movie at home on your couch with your laptop, but it wouldn't be the same because you're missing all those atmospheric elements that make going to the cinema special.
Absolutely. And speaking of the whole experience, I actually kept eating my popcorn well after the movie had finished. You know how at the end of a film they show the credits? Those are the rolling list of names of everyone who worked on the production, the actors, director, camera operators, sound engineers, costume designers, and literally hundreds of other people who contributed to making the movie. Most people get up and leave as soon as the credits start rolling, but I was still settled in my seat, slowly finishing the last handful of popcorn, watching all those names scroll up the screen.
I noticed that. I was ready to leave, standing up and stretching, and you were still sitting there like you were watching the most fascinating thing ever. But you know what? Sometimes there are bonus scenes or extra content after the credits, especially in certain franchises, so it's not always a bad idea to stick around. Although in this particular movie, I can tell you there was nothing exciting waiting at the end, just a standard black screen and some production company logos.
True. But it gave me time to finish my snack, so I'm not complaining. Now, here's another expression I want to teach everyone today, and it's one we use all the time in casual English conversation. When I was telling my sister about the movie later, I said, "Well, at least the popcorn was good." The phrase "at least" is super useful because it allows you to find a silver lining or a positive aspect in an otherwise disappointing or negative situation. It's like saying, "This one thing may not be perfect, but there's still this small bright spot."
Great point. At least is definitely an expression you'll hear constantly in everyday English. Let me give you some quick examples so our listeners can really grasp how versatile it is. I missed my bus this morning, but at least it wasn't raining. The restaurant was fully booked, but at least we found another nice place nearby. I didn't get the job I applied for, but at least I gained interview experience. See the pattern? You're acknowledging something went wrong or wasn't ideal, but then you're balancing it with something positive, even if it's small.
Exactly. It's a way of staying optimistic and not dwelling entirely on the negative. And honestly, that's a healthy mindset to have in life generally, not just when talking about movies. If you can train yourself to look for the "at least" in situations, you'll find yourself being more resilient and positive overall. But I'm getting philosophical here. Let's get back to our movie night story.
Yes, let's. So after the credits finally finished and we made our way out of the theater, we stood in the lobby for a bit just chatting about what we just witnessed. And we both came to the same conclusion pretty quickly: we need to be more selective about what we watch next time. The problem was that we relied too heavily on the marketing materials, those carefully edited previews and trailers that are designed specifically to get people into theaters. And here's an interesting observation. The trailer for this film was actually way more effective at creating tension and fear than the actual movie itself.
Oh, absolutely. The trailer was legitimately creepy. It had this incredible editing with quick cuts and perfectly timed music, and they showed just enough to make you curious without revealing too much. Whoever put together that preview really knew what they were doing. But the full-length feature? It couldn't maintain that same level of quality or atmosphere for 90 minutes. It makes you realize how much skill goes into creating a good trailer. It's almost an art form in itself, separate from the film.
It really is. And this happens more often than you'd think. Sometimes the best moments of a movie are actually in the trailer, and then when you watch the whole thing, you realize you've already seen the highlights. It's a bit frustrating, but it's also a reminder to maybe read some detailed reviews or get recommendations from people whose taste you trust rather than just relying on promotional materials that are, after all, designed to sell tickets regardless of quality.
Speaking of next time, we actually started planning our next cinema outing right there in the lobby. We were both like, okay, we're not giving up on movie theaters just because of one dud. We just need to choose more carefully. And this led to quite a fun conversation about what genre we should go for next. Should we try another horror film and hope for better results? Or should we switch gears completely and go for something totally different?
I was actually advocating for giving horror another shot, but this time doing our homework beforehand. You know, checking multiple review sites, watching some critic discussions, maybe even asking friends who've already seen it what they thought. Because here's the thing. When a horror movie is done well, it's such a thrilling experience. The adrenaline rush, the jump scares, the way a good horror film can stay with you for days afterward, it's really something special. I didn't want to let one disappointing film sour me on the entire genre.
And I totally understand that perspective. But I was leaning in a different direction. I suggested we go see a comedy next time instead. And here was my reasoning, which I think was pretty solid. At least with a comedy we know we'll laugh. Even if the movie isn't the most brilliant piece of cinema ever made, even if the plot is a bit predictable or the jokes are somewhat corny, the primary goal of a comedy is to make people laugh, and that's usually achievable. Plus, I was thinking it might be nice to have a more lighthearted experience after this horror letdown.
When you put it that way, it makes a lot of sense. Comedies have a lower bar for success in some ways. If a horror movie fails to be scary, It's basically failed at its primary function. But if a comedy makes you chuckle even a few times, you can walk away feeling like you got something out of it. And honestly, some of my favorite movie-going experiences have been comedies where the whole audience is laughing together. There's something really communal and joyful about that shared experience of finding something funny.
Exactly. And here's where we can bring in another practical bit of language learning for everyone listening. When we were having this discussion about what to watch next, we were using what's called expressing preferences in English. This is when you talk about what you'd like to do, what you'd prefer, what appeals to you more. There are lots of ways to do this naturally. You can say things like, I'd rather watch a comedy, or I'm leaning toward trying a documentary, or I think I'd prefer something more upbeat this time.
Great point. And it's also important to know how to discuss preferences in a way that doesn't sound pushy or demanding, especially when you're planning activities with other people. You want to express your opinion while still being open to what others think. So instead of saying, we should watch a comedy, which sounds quite forceful, you might say, what would you think about watching a comedy? Or, I'm kind of in the mood for something funny. How does that sound to you? It's more collaborative and friendly.
Precisely. And in relationships and friendships, this kind of considerate communication is really important. You want to make decisions together, not just announce what you've decided unilaterally. So in our conversation in the lobby, it wasn't like either of us was insisting on our preference. We were both just floating ideas, seeing how the other person felt about different options, and ultimately we decided we'd both do a bit of research during the week and then pick something together that we both felt good about.
Which is exactly how it should be. And you know what? These are the kinds of real-life conversations that happen all the time in English. It's not just about knowing individual words or grammar rules. It's about knowing how to navigate social situations, express yourself clearly but kindly, and work with others to reach decisions everyone's happy with. That's practical English in action.
Before we move on to our interactive section, I want to circle back to one more thing about our movie experience. Even though the film itself was a letdown, and even though we spent the walk home talking about how it could have been better, the evening as a whole wasn't a waste. We got out of the house, we had some delicious snacks, we shared an experience together, and we got a funny story to tell. Sometimes things don't turn out exactly as you planned, but there's still value in the attempt.
That's such a healthy way to look at it. And honestly, bad movies can make for better stories than good ones sometimes. Years from now, we'll probably remember this ridiculous monster and our laughter more vividly than we'd remember a perfectly competent but unremarkable scary film. The imperfections, the disappointments, the unexpected twists, these are what make life interesting and give us things to talk about.
Absolutely. And speaking of talking, let's transition now into our interactive section. This is where we want you, our wonderful listeners, to get actively involved in your learning. We're going to practice some of the phrases and expressions we've discussed today, and we encourage you to pause the podcast and actually say these things out loud. Don't just listen passively. Engage with the material. Speaking out loud is crucial for developing fluency and confidence.
So here's what we're going to do. Aiza and I will set up some scenarios, and we'll give you prompts to respond to using the vocabulary and expressions we've covered. Take your time. Don't worry about being perfect, and focus on getting comfortable with the phrases. Ready? Let's start with the expression, if anything. Imagine someone asks you, do you think that class was too difficult? Try to respond using if anything to suggest it was actually the opposite. Go ahead, speak out loud.
Great. Here's a possible answer. Well, if anything, I thought it was a bit too easy for our level. Did you say something similar? The key is using if anything to introduce a contrasting idea. Let's try another scenario. Your friend says, I bet you were bored at that party last night. Use if anything in your response. Pause and practice now.
Excellent. You might have said something like, actually, if anything, I had a better time than I expected. Or, if anything, the party was more entertaining than boring. See how that expression works? Now let's practice at least. Imagine this situation. You went to a restaurant and the food wasn't great, but the service was excellent. How would you describe this using at least? Give it a try.
You could say, the food was disappointing, but at least the servers were really friendly and attentive. Or, well, at least we had excellent service, even if the meal itself was just okay. The pattern is, acknowledge the negative, then use at least to highlight the positive. One more practice with at least. Your team lost the game, but you played well personally. What would you say?
Perfect practice. Something like, we lost the match, but at least I scored my first goal of the season. Or, at least I had my best game yet, even though the team didn't win. Now, we want you to try creating your own sentences. Think about your own life. Maybe something that happened to you recently where things didn't go perfectly, but there was a silver lining. Use, at least, to describe it out loud. We'll give you a moment.
How did that feel? Speaking these phrases out loud probably felt a bit strange at first if you're not used to it, but this is exactly how you build fluency. Your mouth and brain need to practice forming these sentences, not just understanding them when you hear them. Keep practicing throughout your day. These expressions are so common that you'll find dozens of opportunities to use them if you start paying attention.
And remember, making mistakes is completely normal and actually helpful. If you stumbled over words or had to restart your sentence, that's fine. That's part of the learning process. Even native speakers sometimes pause, rephrase, or correct themselves mid-sentence. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress and communication. As long as you're making yourself understood and getting more comfortable with the language, you're succeeding.
Exactly. Now, as we start wrapping up today's episode, let's quickly recap some of the key things we've covered. We talked about our disappointing movie experience and used it as a springboard to explore some really useful everyday English expressions. We learned about if anything, which introduces a contrasting or opposite idea from what was expected. We covered at least, which helps you find the positive in negative situations. We discussed fell flat, meaning something failed to have its intended effect. And we touched on polished off, meaning to finish something completely.
We also talked about broader communication skills like expressing preferences politely, having collaborative conversations when making plans with others, and the importance of being selective about entertainment choices rather than just relying on marketing materials. All of these things, the specific vocabulary, the expressions, and the communication strategies, combine to help you sound more natural and confident when speaking English.
And here's something I want to emphasize before we finish today. Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. You're not going to listen to one podcast episode and suddenly become fluent in English. But if you listen regularly, practice the expressions we teach you, and actively engage with the material rather than just passively consuming it, you will notice improvement over time. Maybe you'll find yourself naturally using, if anything, in a conversation next week. Or maybe at least will pop into your head when you're describing a situation to a friend.
Those little moments when you realize you're using English more naturally, without having to translate from your native language in your head first, those are the victories we want you to celebrate. And remember, you can always come back to our episodes and listen to them multiple times. In fact, we encourage it. Repetition is one of the most effective ways to internalize new language. The first time you listen, you're just getting familiar with the content. The second or third time, you're really absorbing it and making it your own.
Before we say goodbye, I want to thank everyone who's been listening today. Whether this is your first time joining us or you've been with us from the beginning, we really appreciate you choosing to spend your time with us. Learning English is a journey, and we're honored to be part of yours. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with friends who are also learning English. The more people we can help, the better.
And if you have any topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, any questions about English expressions, or any stories you'd like to share about your own language learning journey, please reach out to us. We love hearing from our listeners, and your feedback helps us create content that's actually useful for you. We might even feature your questions or stories in upcoming episodes.
So to close out, let me leave you with this thought. The next time something doesn't go quite as you planned, maybe a movie is disappointing, a restaurant isn't as good as you hoped, or an event doesn't live up to the hype, try to find that at least moment. What's the silver lining? What can you appreciate despite the imperfection? This mindset shift can make you not only a better English speaker but also a happier, more resilient person in general.
That's beautiful, Aiza. And remember, friends, keep practicing, keep speaking, keep making mistakes and learning from them, and most importantly, keep enjoying the process. English is a tool for connecting with people, expressing yourself, and opening up new opportunities. The more you use it, the more comfortable you'll become. We believe in you.
Until next time, everyone, keep learning, keep growing, and keep being awesome. This has been Podcast with Ollie and Aiza. Take care, and we'll talk to you very soon.